Welcome! This video contains an introduction, an interview so you can gain deeper understanding of the subject from spirit level, and a group frequency calibration so you can start to clear the frequency distortion patterns around this topic. Enjoy!
Hi everyone, this is Karen Cheong, and I'm here with my co-host Dennis Kelly. We're often told that if we don't complete something, that we failed, and as a result, we stay with people or within circumstances without evaluating if it's for the greater good. We stay in relationships or roles within organizations or projects for longer than we need to because we don't want to seem like quitters. So today we're going to be talking about the difference between lack of discipline or laziness versus momentum falling away, and adaptability from a higher level order. After the discussion, we're going to wrap it up with a group frequency calibration to begin to remove the distortion patterns around this topic. So let's get started. Dennis?
As I was listening to your introduction, Karen, I couldn't help but think this is really a challenge for all of us. Mm-hmm. You know, as we go through life, we're always kind of asking that question about the project or the job or where we live or relationships or religion or whatever it might be. Do I hang in there? Do I stay with this? Or is it really legit to maybe quit and to try something else? Mm-hmm. Are there any telltale signs that can help us with that?
Mm-hmm. So I would say it's less about telltale signs in terms of your physical reality and more about watching oneself. Okay? So what I mean by that is, so I'm now going to distinguish between, so it's very difficult to discern, right? So when we feel like we want to bail, are we trying to bail because we don't have the gumption to deal with someone difficult? Or are we trying to bail because we just don't want to deal with a difficult person or situation, like I said, or because we don't have the discipline, or we're lazy and we're trying to avoid whatever, okay? It could be that, right? There's sometimes that going on. Or is it really that the momentum has disappeared from this thing for me, right? So it's less about concrete telltale signs and more about observing self, okay? And that becomes easier. So a lot of people will say, how do I figure that out? Which is a mental processing. This has less to do about mental processing, but more global awareness of who you are and how you tend to be. Does that make sense? So what I mean by that is, if you are a person, so there tends to be a spectrum of people, right? There are people who are very self-motivated, sort of overachievery types. Okay, so for them, it's difficult actually to be still. It's very difficult to let things go, into stillness. They always want to power through everything. Okay? They want to achieve. That's their way of being in the world. Okay? On the other end of the spectrum are people who tend to be much more relaxed. And for them, it's actually very difficult to get started, to have discipline, to keep going. Does that make sense? Yep. It's challenging for them. So you have these two ends of the spectrum. Of course, there's variety in between. But we tend to lean typically more towards one than the other. Typically. Okay? Or at least that's what I've noticed. So what I would say is watch yourself and your natural tendency. So for example, if you typically tend to always want to bail when things get tough, right? Because it's a difficult person or a difficult situation or whatever. It could be that your lesson in this particular thing is to continue because you're still meant to learn something in the situation. Mm-hmm. Yes? And then if the energy continues to be hard, right? It's tough. You're still in a difficult situation and it doesn't resolve. Then, okay, at that point, consider shifting on. But then notice if in the next situation that you're in, it becomes the same difficult, not the same person, but the same similar person who's difficult, the same situation that is difficult, whatever. It's the same pattern. Yeah. Then it probably keep going with that. Okay, so to not bail in that situation. Yeah. And of course, if you're doing frequency work, you can release the distortion patterns, which will make it easier so you're not attracting the same loop in terms of people, situation, circumstance. Now, if you're the other type of person, I've talked about one extreme, right? So now we're talking about the other extreme, the other type of person who tends to be very overachievery, wants to do things, wants to get everywhere faster, wants to get more done, wants to be more productive. As you can see, I'm very familiar with this type of person. Anyway. Right? So the discipline then is to watch to see if, aside from your own mental construct of what you think you want to achieve, right? Because you've decided, like people like this, and I know this because I was very much like this, it's like, I want this outcome. I'm going to get here. Okay, so you're striving to get here. So you're going to get through. You're going to drive through the difficult people, the circumstances. Right? You're still plowing through to here. It doesn't really matter. You keep going, keep going. It doesn't matter what the momentum is or lack of it is around you. You're still like striving for this. If you are this type of person, it's to observe yourself and notice, as outside of your mental idea of the construct of I have to get to this outcome. Is the energetic there to support it? Is there a momentum there to support it? To have discipline in your own stillness, to have awareness of what actually is as opposed to what you want. Does that make sense? And then you can determine, okay, well, what's the best approach?
So would part of that be, is that sense, am I still being supported with my mission? Or my relationship, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, and again, my answer still depends on the type of person you tend to be. Because if you tend to bail easily, right, you can very easily see it through the filter of, it's not being supported, I'm just going to pitch out of this thing.
That's my excuse.
That's my excuse, I'm out, right? So we have to be very careful, because that's a very slippery, right, because this is a very slippery standard, right, of is the momentum still there? So my response is, first be aware of yourself. And then notice how you tend to be in these situations, and then assess the energy. Did you see what I'm saying? It actually requires both.
So the key word there was patterns.
Yes.
So if the last 3 or 4 jobs I had, I look back and all of a sudden like, ooh, in each case I kind of left for the same reason. And it was about issues I was having within myself, about my surroundings, or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
So one of the things you really want to look at is self and the patterns.
Yeah.
So
and just be aware of who you are. So I'm not saying change who you are necessarily, right? I mean, there's always room for improvement, there's always frequency work to be done, but to have a basic ability to look at oneself and be like, okay, this is how I tend to be.
Yeah. I think another thing that comes up for a lot of folks is that fear of failure.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to be perceived as a quitter.
Yes, exactly.
As somebody that failed at a marriage, at a job, at a project.
Yep.
So I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
So in light of everything, I'm just going to stay heads down and try to gut my way through it.
Yeah, and a lot of times also is I'm going to stay heads down and gut my way through it. And for some people, there's the additional thing of I don't want to deal with having to get out of it because sometimes it's sticky. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you.
Right, so I'm going to stay here because it's nice and comfy, right? Or I mean, it's tolerable.
This may not be
ideal,
but I know if I go that route, it's like, ooh.
Yeah. It's going to be harder.
Ooh.
So it's to assess where's the fear.
Yeah.
In a way.
Okay.
Right? Are you afraid to leave? Because if you in that process of leaving, it's like super sticky and you're afraid of the confrontations or you're afraid of, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As opposed to, are you afraid to stay because you're worried about how others perceive you and how you judge yourself? So my point is all this still cycles back to self-awareness, right? Where is it that you have the fear? Like, are you staying because you really are afraid of failure and you're afraid of quitting? Or is it because you don't want to deal with the getting out process? Do you see what I'm saying? Those are very different things. Now, it's very difficult, extremely difficult. And please know that I'm not saying this with judgment. We're human, right? This is how we experience the world. So it's very difficult to power through this mentally and emotionally. From my perspective, it's really difficult because it's not just about mindset. It's really if you can, and it is to some degree, right? So I know mindset's important. I'm not trying to poo-poo mindset. Mindset is important, and your mindset is determined by the distortion patterns that are running through you, or not, right? So if you're clear of your distortion patterns, your mindset will change. Okay, we don't realize that, but we do, and also the emotions that we feel. So again, it always comes back to this. If you clear your distortion patterns, then you care less about your own judgment of yourself for quitting or other people's perception of you as a failure, because it really doesn't matter as much. You're just like, whatever, I'm just gonna deal with it. Or, as I said, if you're more afraid of or have fear around the leaving process, you start to care less about the leaving process. You're just like, I don't want to tolerate this anymore, right? The comfort is fine, but I'm not feeling particularly nourished, or this is not for the greater good of the relationship or the job or the whatever. You see, not everyone's being served. Because what happens as your frequency vibration rises and you become less concerned with the external, we start to move into a higher vibrational order at some point where it becomes less about just me and more about the collective. And I'm not saying it from the standpoint of like, I'm sacrificing myself for the collective. It's not about I'm sacrificing myself for the collective. It's just that you're aware that actually it's not just me in this relationship, it's me and you, right? So is it really serving both of us for us to be here together? Like really, truly, and not from like I'm trying to get something from you, I'm not trying to jockey for power, I'm not trying to get some ego thing out of it, but truly, is this relationship serving both of us? Does that make sense? It comes from a higher level. It's hard to understand mentally, but it really does come from a higher level order. Is it serving the greater collective, the greater good? Now, it's very hard to conceive of this when we're at a lower vibrational level because we really think us versus the other person, right? We really do think like that because that's the vibrational level that we're at. There's no blame about it, it's just the way it is. So, but as you rise in vibrational level, you'll notice that what you consider starts to shift. Because your awareness will change, your mind, like what you think about, your emotions, all of that will shift as your distortion patterns drop away. It's amazing, actually.
Yeah, and I just to that point, I can really relate to the fact that as you kind of evolve in the frequency and the vibration and the increase, is that your concern for what other people think
really
drops off.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And as I look back at my own life on a personal level, I look at how many decisions did I make that really I was more concerned about what people thought than what was truly good for me. So
and that happens a lot. It's very human, right? So we do this a lot. And the other thing I would say also is that as we evaluate things, so what is a natural consequence of I'm just going to sidestep because I said when we evaluate things. So this is not about a mental thing, okay? So as we shift in terms of our frequency vibration up, okay, as we rise up because we've released these distortion patterns, what starts to happen is it's, like you said, less about what other people think and more about like, oh, there was a reaction I didn't expect. Okay, I wasn't expecting them. So maybe it was perceived as negative or whatever, like something that I wasn't expecting, or I made a mistake and this happened, or I forgot to do this and whatever. It's to then assess, did I learn something from this? So it's less about the fear of the failure and more of an emphasis on what did I learn? Do you see what I'm saying? It shifts because fear of failure is lower in resonance than what did I learn from this? It's a higher level order, right? So it's not, because failure is, it's funny how we think of failure, right? We think of failure as like really traumatic and it's like terrible, we want to avoid it, we don't want to make mistakes. But really, failure is a very fertile ground for learning. Right? That's how we get to explore the boundaries of like what can we do? What can we change to make something radically better? Right? If you don't fail to some degree, it's hard to even know. Now, you can, of course, be just successful, but a lot of people who are very successful will tell you some of their greatest successes came from a failure because they needed to learn something. So all my point was simply is that as you release these distortions and your vibration starts to rise, the fear of failure starts to become a thing that is less of a concern and more about the opportunity to learn. Because the failure, as you say, doesn't have that same quality of like trauma almost, right? It doesn't, that fear isn't as poignant because it becomes more of an opportunity to learn and you're less scared of it, really. You're okay sort of with, or not okay, but like more neutral around the judgment of others if you do happen to quote unquote fail,
So I'm just curious, when people first start to work with you, I'm just gonna, I would guess that a lot of folks want you to make the decision for them.
Yes, all the time.
Should I stay in this relationship? Should I, go with this new job? Should I? And so I can see, based on what we've been talking about, is, really if I can start the process of releasing the distortions to increase my frequency vibration, I will empower myself
Absolutely.
to make the right decision.
Yes.
For what serves me.
Yes.
Because if I just turn my world over to you and every time, Karen, I got a decision to make.
Yeah.
Can you help me?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because in individual sessions, people will ask me stuff a lot, and I won't, especially for those who have the fear of failure or want to give their power to me, I obviously can tell that, and I won't. I'll say, well, what do you think?
That's frustrating.
Oh, it's so frustrating because I don't want that, and I'm like, I know you don't want that, and I'm not allowing you to go to this place of certainty where you feel better, and it's just this codependent relationship. This is not about codependency. That's not what I'm doing this for. This is about empowerment. So in part, I see the pattern, and I'm not going to play into it. So I'm like, this is about you deciding, okay, I'm going to take this course of action, and whatever happens, happens. And then I'm going to realize I have the strength to adapt. That is what it's about. It's the empowerment of I have the ability to transcend whatever happens. Because you do, especially the stronger you get because of the more frequency work you do and the higher your vibration is. You will transcend, you will adapt.
Yeah.
And you realize that and you're like, oh, okay, well that's pretty cool. And then you gain confidence. That is not really a mental construct. It's a very internal feeling. It's not exactly even a feeling. It's more like this way of being that sort of percolates through because you have this knowingness. It's stronger than a feeling. It's a knowingness.
A knowingness. Yeah.
Right? Like, yes, okay, I've got this on some level, meaning not that I've got the right choice, but I've got it in the sense of whatever comes my way, I will learn from it. I will learn from it on some level that will have me propel upwards in terms of my own journey.
And whatever that decision is, will bring other opportunities.
Exactly.
For personal growth.
Yeah. And you don't know what it's going to be.
And you have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah.
And when I first start to work with you, I'm a little scared because now you're asking me to go into the unknown.
Yeah.
It's like, so I make this decision.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me, Karen, what's going to happen? What's going to happen?
Yes. Yeah. Because that's the mind, and it's very normal, it's very human seeking certainty because we feel safe there. But it's not, the irony is that it is about releasing that need for certainty. Okay, and it sounds funny to someone who doesn't know what I'm talking about. There is tremendous liberation when that need is not as present, because you realize it's freedom because you're like, well, I'm just gonna adapt. I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen, and it almost doesn't matter because then you're so neutral. It doesn't matter so much. Yeah. So it's actually kind of fun because you're like, well, what's gonna happen? And it's not always pleasant. It isn't. And that's when you have accountability, right? So if you make a mistake, sometimes it's good to say, oh, I apologize, I made a mistake. We're human, we make errors, it happens. And then, okay, and here's how I'm gonna rectify it, right? So here's my way of creating a solution for it. And perhaps even in doing that, that is the learning.
And so the word that came to me as you were saying that is you get to the point where you welcome. Mm-hmm. Going into that point of not knowing.
Yes.
Because it's like, that's what life is.
Yeah.
It's magical, it's mystical.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answers.
Yeah. And I would say it becomes more than a point, it just becomes what is.
Yeah.
And so it just is. Yeah. And so that's okay. It's becoming, honestly, it's about becoming comfortable with the discomfort. Yeah. It's becoming uncomfortable with I said that wrong. Becoming comfortable with the discomfort and comfortable with the not yet known. We always like to know because, again, it gives us certainty. So it's like, do you necessarily know why you've signed up for this course? No, I just know I need to. I'm going to find out. And it may be nothing. I have no idea, but we're going to go.
Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. So to go back to how do you know when to quit?
Yeah.
My answer is, again, be aware of yourself and then know your tendencies. Watch your patterns, what you tend to do. And then what will happen is as you do more work, you will become much more aware of momentum and when it's gone and if it's serving the whole for this to continue. So that would be my answer to your question.
That's very, very helpful. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Karen, could you help me? I hear so often when I look at your video or your website, GFC. Exactly what is that?
A GFC is a group frequency calibration, which looks a lot like a guided meditation on a particular topic. And what I'm doing is I'm helping you to remove the distortion patterns of that particular topic. And because you're coming together as a mastermind in a group to connect to Pure Source even more and to clear the distortion patterns of this particular topic, what happens is a tremendous amount of momentum starts to happen because of the energetic of the entire group, and each individual is able to move faster and ascend higher than they could have on their own.
Welcome everyone to the group frequency calibration for when it's legit to quit. So first, becoming aware of your body. Noticing the position that you're sitting, standing, or lying down in. Noticing if it's the same as it always is, or if it's a little bit different today. Wiggling around if it's not comfortable until you get comfortable. Noticing if there's tension in the body. Noticing your relative position of your hands and your feet. Just really noticing the position of your body. Good. And now, please become aware of your breath. Without changing it at first, just become aware of your breath as it is in this moment. And now that you have your awareness on your breath, taking this opportunity to deepen the breath, to allow it to become slower, fuller, more at ease. Allowing it to move from the chest into the stomach. Good. And now please become aware of your surroundings. Noticing the smell around you. So there are lots of little distinct smells if we pay attention. The smell of our lotion or our soap. The smell of our own sweat. Our laundry detergent. The fibers of the fabric that you're wearing. And now extending your smell to further around you, in the room, perhaps even the smell of the outdoors if you have a window open. Just extending your sense of smell. And now becoming aware of what your skin is touching. So the feel of the fabric or whatever surface you are sitting or standing or lying down on. So feeling the texture of that surface. And now going a little further, becoming aware of the air, the temperature of the air, the texture of the air. We don't really think about air having texture, but it does in terms of its humidity, if it's charged with ions, if it's flat. Just notice the texture of the air. And what I mean by flat is it's just, there's not a lot of feeling in it. in the middle of a city somewhere and there's not a lot of feeling to it. Good. Nice. So becoming now aware of your xiphoid process, which is right at the base of your sternum. Your sternum is that big, thick bone in the center of your chest where your ribs meet in front of your body. So right at the base of that bone, where it becomes flesh and it's a little tender when you press on it, that's your xiphoid process. So from your xiphoid process all the way in a straight line down to your belly button. And as you become aware of this center line, let's go ahead and take a nice big breath together. And at the very top of your inhale, holding your breath in for a count of 4. And then when you have completed that inhale, releasing all the air out of your lungs and holding your breath out for a count of 5. And for those of you who have a faster count, bringing your attention now, please, to your throat space, breathing normally. As we wait for the mastermind to coalesce, to become more coherent. And as we wait for that to happen, for those who are new, please note that I'm working with you on the group and the subgroup level, and that I'll be making noises on my end. So you'll likely hear me exhale sharply, or yawn, or possibly even hum. That's just how I remove the distortion patterns. And more I'm working in silence, especially as I access higher and higher frequencies. So to make verbal or physical noise doesn't benefit you. Yeah. So, already working on you as we are waiting for the mastermind to coalesce, which it just has. Good, so now that we're here, we're going to ask ourselves the following question. How can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? Yeah. And as you ask yourself that question, please imagine, sense, feel, or become aware of the space in the very center of your body. And as you become aware of this space, become aware of a brilliance at its very core. And as you have your attention on this brilliance, it starts to intensify. And as it intensifies, it expands outwards through your cells, through all of your organs, out through your bones, radiating out through your flesh and your muscles, through the pores of your skin, into the space between your physical body and your spirit body, which is at arm's length, all around you. Yes. And now please become very aware of or notice the brilliance within the sphere. And as you notice that, for some of you, that brilliance becomes so intense that the sphere begins to oscillate or shake from side to side. For some of you, it will start to spin, and for others, it will remain still. none of these is better than the other. They're simply different. Just noticing what happens with the sphere. And now please imagine or become aware of the space all around the sphere. And as you become aware of this infinite space, I'm working on spirit level to increase your frequency resonance. The higher your resonance, the more effective the session is because it comes from the highest resonating order. And 2, because you cannot yet come here to this level on your own yet. This will allow you to know where you're going. Good. And now becoming aware, please, of your solar plexus between your belly button and the base of your sternum and the front of your throat. And if it's helpful for you to put a hand on each of these points, please go ahead and do that. And if it's not helpful for you to do that, then don't. So as you have your awareness on these 2 spots, the first distortion pattern that we're going to remove is that of the thought form. It's a cultural thought form of completion being the best way. Okay, so that there is something that is the best or like the most desirable from completing something. So with this thought form here and the resulting shame and guilt and self-judgment if you do not complete something, this binds you to something even if it's no longer of the highest resonating order. So let's release this so you have a higher form of adaptability. So releasing all of these patterns. Yeah. Good. Yeah, and bring your attention now, please, between your heart space in the center of your chest and your nipple line, all the way up in a straight line through the center into the roof palate of your mouth. Yeah. So releasing these patterns of you are more worthy, more honorable, better, etc. if you just complete something. Completion does not necessarily mean better, it just means completion. Sometimes it's better for us to switch tacks in the middle of a project to move something that's of a higher resonating order. If we attach to completion, well, it's not about really what's best, it's about just completing. So we become bound by this idea of completing. And I'm not suggesting don't exert discipline in order to complete something. That, of course, is important. And to allow room for a higher level of adaptability. Yep. Bringing your attention now, please, to the entire solar plexus, okay, and the hollow of your throat at the same time. So this has to do with clarity or discernment, okay, depending on how you tend to see the world. So this is about knowing when you want to quit because you just don't feel like putting any effort anymore, okay, and you'd rather just be done, versus the energy has gone out of this and we're switching tacks to something else. Okay, so clarity on when we just don't feel like putting in the effort versus actually sometimes having to put in more effort to switch tacks, but knowing that it's of a better and higher outcome. So sometimes it's good to dig in and keep going, and other times it's better to let go. So creating some clarity around your own state, your own agenda in quitting. Okay, has it just gotten too hard? You don't feel like it anymore? Or is that just a reflection of your distortion? So providing clarity here, okay, so you can see self more clearly, and if required, others. Good. Yeah, giving you more space from your thoughts and your emotions so you can observe yourself better, so you can see yourself more clearly. Good. Becoming aware of the xiphoid process. So anchoring in this, let's call it ability, or perception or feeling sense of being able to feel the choice that is of the highest resonating order. That could mean stopping. Okay, so higher resonating order means that the resonance is the greatest for the most people. That's how I'm going to define it. So sometimes stopping is that, and other times it's persevering. So just clarifying or instilling here this distinction, so you can start to tell the difference more easily. Good. Nice. Bring your attention now, please, to your xiphoid process again, and 3 inches directly beneath it towards your belly button. I'm going to clear out, reset, integrate the pain body. Good. This brings us to the end of this session. I look forward to working with you on the next GFC. These GFCs help people release distortion patterns. It's my sincere hope that you benefit profoundly from this series, which is why I spend so much of my personal resources creating these as my gift to the world. If a GFC topic resonates with you, often more work that can be provided in this one GFC is needed to really clear or loosen deeply held distortion patterns in areas that are sticky. Because these patterns are like layers of an onion, usually there are multiple layers to individual topics. Depending on how much of a challenge this topic is for you, it may make sense for you to go deeper than what this session allows. If you feel this is the case for you, please visit sphericalluminosity.com for more targeted support.